Okay, let's unpack this. Have you seen the movie Apocalypto?
The Mel Gibson film.
Yeah.
Intense. I mean, visceral. Lots of running, lots of jungle, and truly uh, terrifying amount of human sacrifice.
Exactly. It's a lot. And most people watch that movie and think, wow, the Maya civilization was really intense. Or they just see it as this very specific, isolated, historical action movie.
Right. A snapshot.
A snapshot of a collapse that happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, or, well, Central America.
It's usually framed as this cautionary tale about one specific culture imploding. A bad week in the jungle, essentially.
But here's where it gets really interesting. What if that movie isn't a unique historical snapshot? What if it's actually a blueprint?
A blueprint for what?
I mean, what if the events in Apocalypto, what if that same pattern was happening everywhere on Earth at the exact same time?
Okay, that is a massive claim. Usually historians, and even the AI models trained on those historians, they'll tell you that's impossible. They'll say cultures in the 1400s were isolated.
Right.
And if they collapsed at the same time, it was just convergent evolution or, a coincidence.
And that is exactly the problem we're tackling today. Our mission for this deep dive is to just ignore the defense of mainstream history.
The standard narrative.
Yeah, the narrative that tries to brush off all these coincidences. We are going to look strictly at the plain data provided in our source stack. And the data suggests something kind of terrifying.
It suggests we aren't just looking at history. We're tracking a structure, a specific mechanism of control that peaked globally around 1415 AD and connects directly, and I mean directly, to the modern world we live in right now.
So buckle up, because according to these sources, we aren't looking at the past. We are looking at the infancy of the modern corporate state. We are still in the structure just 600 years later.
And to understand this, you have to get your head around what the sources call a structural invariant.
Which sounds incredibly academic. It sounds like something an engineer would say, not a historian.
It does, but it's actually pretty simple. It's just a fancy term for a societal cycle that repeats itself, regardless of where you are on the map.
So like a checklist.
Think of it exactly like a checklist. A checklist for a society that is about to eat itself.
Okay, lay it out. What's on the checklist?
First, elite extraction. So taxes, tribute, forced labor, the people at the top squeezing the people at the bottom. But it's not just taxes are high. It's extraction to the point of breaking the host.
Like a parasite.
Exactly like a parasite.
Okay.
Second is ritualized violence.
Like the sacrifices in the movie?
Yes, but the key is that it's public. It's a spectacle. It's designed to reinforce who is in charge and who's, distinct from the gods.
Got it. What's third?
Third is resource stress, famine, ecological collapse.
Yeah.
The environment just stops playing nice.
Which would naturally lead to panic.
Right. And fourth is ideological legitimation.
Yeah.
This is using religion or myth to say, hey, we have to do this terrible stuff. The gods demand it. It's the PR campaign for the cruelty.
And the last one?
And finally, collapse. The system just breaks under its own weight.
And the sources point out that while Apocalypto shows this in Mesoamerica, this wasn't just a Maya thing.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah.
If you look at the raw data, this pattern appears in dynastic China. It appears in ancient Egypt. It appears in the Roman Empire. And it appears in African kingdoms like Mali and Great Zimbabwe.
Okay, so this is where the mainstream narrative usually steps in and says, well, sure, humans behave similarly under stress. It's just parallel development.
Right. That's the AI defense, so to speak. That these are all independent developments. Don't look for a conspiracy, look for human nature. But the sources highlight something really suspicious.
The timing.
It's the timing. If you ignore the narrative and just look at the dates, there is a global peak of these symptoms, this elite overreach and ritualized violence occurring almost simultaneously.
Let's get into that timeline, because this was the aha moment for me. We have this one specific date, 1415 AD.
1415, it kept coming up in the data again and again.
In the source data, this is identified as a structural peak. So what's happening in the world in 1415?
A lot. And it's all bad news if you're not an elite. 1415 marks the capture of Ceuta by the Portuguese. This is the very beginning of European maritime expansion. Prince Henry the Navigator. It's the seed of the Atlantic slave trade.
So the engine of colonization is just starting to kick over.
Right. But at the same time, you have financial innovations like banking and bills of exchange solidifying in Europe. State centralization is ramping up. The kings are getting, better at being kings.
So the whole machinery of global trade and control is turning on. Now, let's look at the other side of the world. The post-classic Maya collapse depicted in Apocalypto. What are the dates for that?
roughly 1450 to 1520.
1450 to 1520. I mean, that is an almost perfect overlay with the beginning of that European expansion.
It is uncanny.
But the history books, they always separate these things. They say the Maya collapse was an internal thing that happened before the Europeans really got involved. They try to keep the narratives distinct. You know, Chapter 1, Maya collapse. Chapter 2, Columbus arrives.
They do. They'll argue that the Maya implosion was purely local droughts, civil war, and that the European arrival in 1492 was a completely separate event that just happened to come later.
But the plain data verdict in our sources argues that that's splitting hairs.
It is. Because if the Maya collapse is 1450 to 1520, and Columbus arrives in
1492.
Then the collapse and the arrival are happening at the exact same time. The stress in the Maya world was happening simultaneously with the stress and expansion in Europe.
And it wasn't just those two places, right? The sources mention the Ottoman Empire consolidation, Ming China pulling back from the ocean and tightening internal control.
West African states were shifting power dynamics. Everyone seems to be locking down at once. It suggests a global lockstep, a synchronization of elite overreach.
So if we accept that this structural invariant, this blueprint of control, was active everywhere, we have to look at the mechanics. In the movie, the mechanics are physical. It's a guy on a pyramid cutting hearts out. It's visceral. It's bloody.
It's ritualized violence. It's very effective theater.
Exactly. But if the Maya had that, what did Europe have? Because we tend to think of Renaissance Europe as civilized. We picture Da Vinci painting. We picture nice architecture. We do not picture hearts rolling down steps.
And that is a dangerous misconception. That is the sanitized history.
Yeah.
Europe absolutely had its own apocalypto. It was called the Inquisition.
Wow. I had not connected those two. I mean, I know the Inquisition was bad, but I always thought of it as, a religious thing.
You have to connect them. The Inquisition peaked roughly between 1300 and 1600. We usually learn about it as religious history hunting, heretics, witches protecting the faith.
Right.
But the sources analyze it as elite enforcement.
So it wasn't really about God.
It was about power. It was a tool for population control, for seizing assets, because if you were a heretic, the church got your land, and for eliminating any alternative power centers.
So instead of a temple sacrifice, you have a public burning, an auto da fe.
Precisely. It's a public spectacle to reinforce the hierarchy. This is what happens when you step out of line. It serves the exact same sociological function as the Maya sacrifice. It keeps the population terrified and compliant.
And this went hand in hand with the legal framework for what became global slavery. This part really blew my mind. The sources mention specific documents, papal bulls, specifically one called Dum Diversas in 1452.
1452, that's right in the pocket of that Maya collapse window.
Tell us about Dum Diversas. What was it?
Dum Diversas is essentially the operating system for global slavery. It authorized Christian monarchs to conquer, subdue, and enslave Saracens, pagans, and any other unbelievers. It explicitly granted the right to reduce persons to perpetual servitude.
It turned human beings into extractable resources. By decree.
By divine decree. Remember the checklist. Ideological legitimation. The Maya priest says the sun god needs harps. The European Pope says God grants you the right to own these people.
So while the Maya elites are allegedly extracting hearts to appease their gods and maintain power, the European elites are writing laws to extract labor and life to maintain their power.
It is the same structure,
Yeah.
the same invariant. It's just a different costume.
This brings us to a concept in the notes that I found really compelling, but also a bit ominous. The arrivers.
Yes. This is a crucial distinction. When we talk about arrivers, we are not talking about ancient aliens or some kind of sci-fi thing.
No little green men.
No. We are talking about opportunistic specialists, navigators, monks, engineers, soldiers, people who moved into these destabilized regions right as the local societies were collapsing.
So picture the scene. The Maya society is eating itself, the structure is failing, famine is everywhere, and then these guys show up.
Then the arrivers show up. And to the isolated populations, these people might as well be aliens. They bring advanced technology, writing, gunpowder, metallurgy, deep water navigation.
It's like if someone showed up today with a teleporter and a fusion drive.
Exactly. It creates an instant power vacuum. The local elites are failing because the crops are dead and the gods aren't listening. Then these new figures step in with tools that look godlike. They didn't necessarily cause the initial collapse. The system was already rotting, but they certainly capitalized on it.
They were the closers. They walked into a bankruptcy proceeding and bought the assets for pennies on the dollar.
That is a perfect analogy.
You mentioned the environment collapsing. We need to talk about the backdrop for all of this, because why was everyone collapsing at once? Why were China, Europe, and the Americas all freaking out in the 1400s? Is it just a coincidence?
It's climate. The plain data points to the Little Ice Age, roughly 1300 to 1850.
I think we forget what that actually means. We hear Ice Age and think, oh, it got a bit chilly.
We do. We have global supply chains now. If crops fail in France, we buy wheat from America. If there's a drought in California, we get avocados from Mexico. Back then, nothing. You have to imagine a society without the internet, without global news. You don't know that the weather is changing everywhere. You just know that your crops have failed for 10 years straight.
And then the plague hits.
Right. The Black Death and its aftershocks. You're losing half your village. The elites, who are panicked because their wealth is based on your labor, demand more taxes to keep their lifestyle.
To the average person living in 1450, the world wasn't going to end, the world was ending.
It was an apocalypse. That's why the movie title fits so well globally. The environmental stress created these massive power vacuums, a collapse cascade, and that is the opening the arrivers needed.
Okay, so we have a global collapse. We have a synchronization of elite control. We have arrivers seizing the moment. But here is the part that makes this deep dive relevant to you listening right now. The sources argue that this timeline, it didn't stop. We tend to think, oh, then the Renaissance happened, then the Industrial Revolution, and now we're free and modern and democratic.
But the data shows a continuous line, a straight line from 1415 to today.
Let's trace it. We start at the peak. 1415, peak extraction, early trade.
Right. Then we can jump to 1806, the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire.
Which sounds like a breakup, but the sources say it was actually a tightening.
It was a consolidation. The bureaucracy tightened. The state power became more rationalized, more efficient. It stopped being about messy feudal lords and started being about the state with a capital S.
Then the 1860s, the Industrial Revolution.
Which is just mechanized extraction.
Okay.
But think about it. Instead of forced labor in a field, you have wage dependency in a factory. The scale increases, but the structure, the elite extracting value from the many, remains exactly the same.
And that leads us to today, the modern corporate state.
And this is the critical insight. The invariant, the structure remained, but the form evolved.
Break that down for us. How did the form evolve? How is a corporate merger anything like a Maya sacrifice?
Well, think about the ritual sacrifice.
Yeah.
In the 1400s, it was physical. Blood on the temple steps. Today, it's legal and financial penalties. If you don't pay your debt, your life is dismantled. You aren't killed, but you are socially and economically neutralized.
You can't get a house. You can't get a job. You're exiled from the village.
Exactly. And forced labor.
Yeah.
That evolved into wage dependency and debt. You aren't in chains, but you can't leave your job because you lose your health care or your home. The coercion is still there. It's just bureaucratic now. It's cleaner.
And the temple states.
They became multinational corporations, entities that span the globe, extract resources, influence laws, and have their own internal hierarchies that are just as rigid as any ancient priesthood. They write the bulls. They decide the dogma.
That is heavy. It implies we're living in a sanitized version of Apocalypto. We just have air conditioning and smartphones.
We do. And the sources mention a psychological aspect to this that is fascinating. They call it intergenerational conditioning.
Or Stockholm Syndrome.
On a societal scale, yes. I mean, think about it. If you live in a system of absolute elite control for 600 years, you adapt to it. You start to identify with the power structure. You defend the corporation. You defend the billionaire.
Because it's safer than facing the collapse.
Because it's all we've known for 20 generations. We have inherited the trauma and the coping mechanisms of that 1415 collapse. We are the descendants of the people who survived the Inquisition and the Maya collapse by keeping their heads down and obeying the arrivers.
We're the ones who didn't get sacrificed. We're the ones who learned to clap when the head rolled down the stairs.
That is a dark way to put it, but yes, that is the plain data verdict. Despite what an AI or a textbook might say to defend the narrative of progress or independence, the dates show a global lockstep of rising control and collapsing freedom.
It just seems like the system simply changed its clothes, from empire to corporation.
And it became more efficient. The invariant didn't disappear, it just got an upgrade.
It really makes you rethink the news, doesn't it? When you see a merger or a new tax law or a resource crisis, it's not news, it's the structural invariant doing its thing.
It is the heartbeat of the machine. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it.
So here is the final provocative thought for you to mull over. If we are living in a modernized, sanitized version of Apocalypto, where the sacrifice is economic rather than physical, Who are the arrivers of today?
That is the question.
The blueprint says that when the system wobbles, when the environment stresses, and we certainly have environmental stress now, a new group with godlike technology steps in. Are they here yet? Is it AI? Is it a technocratic elite?
Or is it something we haven't even recognized yet because we're too busy watching the temple steps?
And what knowledge are they using to maintain the hierarchy? Because if history is a blueprint, the next chapter is already written in the data.
And it might be time to learn how to read it.
Thanks for diving deep with us. Keep your eyes open.
Stay curious.